start off by sharing a couple statistics with you. First of all, 20%, so 1 out of every 5 people from the age of 13 to 18 live with some kind of mental health condition. Half of those, or no, I should say, half of all lifetime cases of mental health illness begin by the age of 14, and 75% of those begin by the age of 24. So suicide is the third leading cause of death among ages 10 to 24. And right now, today, there are approximately 8.6 million people having suicidal thoughts as we speak today. So another thing, you may have heard this one before. Teenagers today have the same, like on average, teenagers today have the same anxiety levels that psychiatric patients had in the 1950s. So just your average teen in America today, if they were to be tested for their anxiety levels, it would be very similar to people that were admitted into psychiatric places in the 50s. So that's pretty crazy to think about as well. One of the scariest things to share with you is, according to most studies, there's only between 13% and 25% of people that have mental health issues that get help of any kind. So I saw that like on the low end, like some people with eating disorders or things like that, only like 12% report. And when it comes to suicide, only 25%. So 1 out of every 4 people with having suicidal thoughts, they don't even tell anyone about it. They don't seek the help that they need. So one of the top messages that I want you to know tonight is that you're not alone. And obviously those statistics show you you're not alone. You are no less of a person if you have struggles. You are no less of a Christian if you have struggles with any of this. Years ago at CIY, they had, this was probably like 8 or 10 years ago, they did this thing where every person wrote down something they were struggling with, but they didn't put their name on it. Then they redistributed those pieces of paper. And so you would get a piece of paper that someone else wrote and something they're struggling with, and you were going to pray for them. And then the speaker said, okay, I want you to stand up if your card says something like this or that. They got to suicide. They said, stand up if your card says something about suicide. And it was like, it seemed to me like it was half the room that stood up. And the guy like broke down in tears, and he was just blown away by it. Now that's a Christian conference. There's thousands of Christians there, and that is heartbreaking to see that and to like experience it. But it also shows you are not alone if you have those thoughts, and it's kind of a misconception to feel like I have to bottle this in, or I can't talk to anyone about it, or I'm less of a Christian if I have some of those thoughts. I want to share with you some quotes from several different people. I think some of them, like many of them are Christian, some of them are not. Some of them you'll know, some of them you won't. But I want to just kind of get it out there to like, not just hear from me, but hear from a lot of people when it comes to the topic. One of them, it's not on the slides, but this one, a person said that depression is like drowning, except you can see everyone else around you still breathing. Another person said, cheer up, go tell a deaf person to start listening better. So they're basically saying, like, someone who struggles with this, you can't just say, cheer up, snap out of it. It's something that they're really dealing with. So this one is on there. Is it coming up? Stephen Fry said this: if you know someone who's depressed, please resolve to never ask them why. Depression is not a straightforward response to a bad situation. Depression is just like the weather. It's hard to be a friend to someone who's depressed, but it is one of the kindest, noblest, and best things you'll ever do. The next one, Elizabeth Wurtzel, says, a human being can survive almost anything as long as she sees the end in sight. But depression is so insidious and it compounds daily that it's impossible to ever see the end. Barbara Kingsolver, it looks like, is her name. There's no point treating a depressed person as though she were just feeling sad, saying, there now, hang on, you'll get over it. Sadness is more or less like a head cold. With patience, it passes. Depression is like cancer. So here's a name that you should know, C.S. Lewis. He said this in one of his books. Mental pain is less dramatic than physical pain, but it's more common and also more hard to bear. The frequent attempt to conceal mental pain increases the burden, It's easier to say my tooth is aching than to say my heart is broken. Another one, we got a couple more here. Dan Reynolds says, people who have never dealt with depression think it's just being sad or being in a bad mood. That's not what depression is for me. It's falling into a state of grayness and numbness. Khalid, the artist, said, I suffer from anxiety, moments of depression. I'm in my head so much, and I'm thinking so much. I'm playing tug of war within my mind. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson said this, I found that with depression, one of the most important things you could realize is that you are not alone. Christian rapper Andy Mineo says, there is a direct correlation between anxiety and depression and the rise of social media. The writing's on the wall, in my opinion. And the last one to share from the Biebs, Justin Bieber, put this on his Instagram. Don't stop fighting. The battle has already been won. Don't let fear and anxiety win. God isn't afraid of your pain and your brokenness. He actually welcomes it. There's hope in him. So that gives you some perspective about what it can be, what people are dealing with, a lot of different perspectives in there. Also, I put this on social media, and I was welcoming anyone who had opinions, and I was getting some messages mainly through direct message, but a girl that I went to high school with sent me something, and she said, basically, she was excited that we were addressing this because a lot of churches don't. And she said that she was depressed and suicidal in junior high and never dealt with it till her mid-20s. And it was mainly about not understanding her identity in Christ. And the more she understood that, the less power depression had over her. The scriptures that were really a big help to her. Also, she found some counselors at first that didn't impact her at all. So future reference, if you ever have counseling and it's not impacting you, it could mean, find a different person, keep trying, because that's what happened for her. She was in a Bible study and a guy prayed over her, and he said, I broke the chains of depression in your life. She said she woke up the next morning and she felt like a brand new mind. She said it was just unbelievable. But she does say, so important, why spending time in the Word so important. Counselors that are biblical, and so she had a lot of good comments. And then I'll share one more with you. Somebody else sent me a message. Very little resources for people unless they go looking. And let me see. Making sure that a teen has a chance to know where help is, even if they're not supported by their own family, is the biggest thing. Making sure that you as a leader are prepared, being able to say you're there if they need you. They need to know they're worthy, loved, deeply, and would be deeply missed. They can trust their church leaders and friends. Really good stuff in there as well. So, had a lot of messages. Those are some of the main ones to think about. I do want you to know that a key thing in understanding this is that if you do not have depression or severe anxiety, mental illness of some kind, then you could not possibly know what it's like. And sometimes we try to think we know and we try to pretend like we know. And the reason I know that is because there's a lot of people that have talked to me that have those things and they can't explain it. They don't know how to put it into words. Some people have said that, like, I wake up one morning and there's no reason for me to be down, but I just, like, something's off. I just don't know. Like, I'm in my head and I don't know what to do about it. Lots of celebrities, like, it has nothing to do with, your fame or power or money either. I've shared this before, but the lead singer of Linkin Park, who took his own life, there's a video of him, like, the day before with his family, happy. Like, they said they spent the weekend with him and there was no signs whatsoever, and incredibly powerful, rich, successful, had a great family, so it wasn't like he was, alone with the family. And then the next day, something happens in his mind and he takes his own life, and it's crazy to think about. There is absolutely a major misconception. I touched on it a little bit, but the misconception is that, well, Christians shouldn't struggle with that, or, churches shouldn't really even talk about that. There's somebody may even say, like, how could you even be depressed if you've got Jesus? And I know there's an element of truth to that when it comes to, like, some of the small things in life that sometimes we maybe make a big deal that maybe aren't. But when it comes to something as serious as mental health, it's okay to not be okay. And there's this again misconception of that whole thought of like I shouldn't be having these thoughts, or Christians shouldn't even talk about it and whatever else. If you read the little thing called the Bible, you'll see some problems with those misconceptions. And here's an example. You guys know the story of Jonah and the whale, right? You know that story? Well, before he was swallowed by a big fish, he told the guys to throw him overboard. What was he doing? Yeah, he wasn't like, I just want to go for a swim. No, he was like, he wanted his life to be over. And this is a person that God used, yet he had this thought in his mind. There's also a couple examples that a lot of people don't talk about this, but Moses and Elijah, both godly men, obviously, they both prayed at one time for God to take their life. Like, I want to die. I don't want to be here. Moses and Elijah prayed those prayers to God. So the myth that we've been bought into is that godly people, don't deal with depression and suicidal thoughts. First step is stop pretending like we have it all together. Second step, find someone to talk to, because another misconception, this is huge, is the people that think it's a weakness to seek help. I promise you, with all that I have, I'll tell you right now, it is a strength to seek help. It is not weakness. So for you to ever feel like, I don't want people to know that I go to a therapist or counselor. I don't even want, I just think I should be stronger than that. It is actually stronger to admit I don't have it all together, and I'm going to go seek help. I'm going to find the right help, and that is a beautiful thing. There's actually strength in doing that. So professional counseling, especially the Christian professional counseling, highly recommended, and there's nothing wrong with it whatsoever. So here's another key understanding for Christians. God uses us in our weakness. He does use us in our strengths. The talents He's given you, He wants you to use them for Him, but He also uses us in our weaknesses. When I can't do something, that's when He shows up even more. That's when His power is shown. And I want you guys to know that this verse in, 2 Corinthians, Paul says, He said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. So I will boast all the more about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest in me. So when you struggle with something, do not be afraid to use it. Don't be afraid to name it. Don't be afraid to basically make it part of your story. Say, this is what I've struggled with. This is what God is teaching me through it. This is how God is with me through it. This is how God shows up, how powerful He is through my weakness. That is extremely Christian, extremely biblical, and a lot different than what a lot of people think when they think I got to bottle it up. A lot of good stuff about, there's a famous pastor, Perry Noble. He was suicidal, didn't know where it was coming from, had a growing church, happy family. He did a series called I'm Overwhelmed at his church, and to this day it's one of the most watched things online, like his message on suicide. It was just, there's people that care and want to see what it's all about. So again, I will say Scripture does say rejoice in the Lord always, and it says, be joyful in all things. Honestly, as Christians, we should be the most optimistic and joyful people in the world, but that still doesn't account for the mental illness of some kind. And I want you to, one thing to think about is if I ever start having these thoughts and I don't really know where they're coming from, if it's negative, if I'm down in the dumps, I don't really know why, and it's like a pattern, that would be a definite possibility, definite sign to seek help in that way. And anyone ever heard of To Write Love on Her Arms? It's an organization and something you should look up. It's an amazing organization that helps a lot of people. And it started with one person's story, their suicidal story and what happened. So To Write Love on Her Arms is what that's called.